I want you to take a moment and think about all the emotions and the thoughts that have been running through your head over the last few weeks, maybe even months, depending on when you were aware of what was happening in our world, in our countries, in our communities, perhaps even in your homes. Just bring to mind what emotion was there, what beliefs showed up, and more importantly, think about what impact have those thoughts or beliefs and emotions had on your behavior. Welcome to Time to Come Alive. My name is Valerie Hope. I'm your host and your coach. And today we have a special guest. As we do in every episode of Time to Come Alive, have an opportunity to have a conversation that is conscious. It's an opportunity to connect. And then as a result, you get to be even more creative. And today is no exception. I have the honor and pleasure, privilege really, to have Dr. Scott Mills as a guest on the show. And I got to tell you that I met Dr. Scott through a Mind Valley program called Money EQ. He was responsible for rewiring my brain. Scott, you're responsible for rewiring my brain and everything that my crazy brain was doing and thinking around money and emotion. And one of the things I really appreciated about your approach, first of all, it was super simple is the word that comes to mind, although very, very in depth. There was a lot of content that you were able to give us in very simple ways. The exercises that we did were so approachable. And I had some great breakthroughs as a result, and we can talk about that some other time perhaps, but I so appreciated what you brought, the practicality that you brought to something that was so profound. And our brain is really so confusing sometimes, especially in times of high stress. So I'm so grateful that you are taking the initiative and helping us deal with some of the stress that has come up as a result of everything happening around the coronavirus and COVID-19 and the impact it's had on not only our psyche, but what's happening in our communities. What would you like for us to know about you?
Well, first of all, I just got to say thank you for creating this amazing forum to play. And I just love your spirit and your energy. So, this is exciting to sit down for a conversation with you and see what your brilliance shines on today. So, what I would say is just to get us started, um, the work that I do, you were mentioning the money EQ work. So much of the work I do is around helping people find resourcefulness in themselves and to really look beyond things like fear, anxiety, overwhelm, all of those emotions that so many of us are experiencing a lot of right now. I've been noticing this low kind of rumble, and I don't know if other people are noticing this too, but it's kind of just at the base of my spine. And I go out, to buy the groceries, and you just can feel the anxiety. And you turn on the news and you feel it. And what I'm hoping we get to do today is really help people feel much more grounded, much more um, centered, but also expansive. Because I think one of the things we often want to do in these fearful places is kind of crawl in on ourselves and curl up in the fetal position with a bag full of M&Ms and watch Netflix for all day. And I'm okay with that sometimes, but I also want to make sure people are resourceful and they're using this as an opportunity to evolve and support other people as well.
M&Ms are not the answer. Got it. Potato chips? No, no.
They're an occasional answer. You can't do
Occasional
this
answer.
24/7.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I won't take anything away from people. And I'll throw this out right now because I think a lot of people think that in a period like this, you should not do any kind of numbing or any kind of, you're just escaping. Here's the thing, like the world is a little crazy. It's okay to take an hour or two to escape. It's okay to take a little bit of time where you sit and you watch silly television, you let your brain numb, you let yourself check out. You can check back in 2 hours. It's
Mhm.
okay. If anybody's telling you it's not okay ever to let yourself rest, they're just being unfair to you. Please, it's okay. You can just be gentle with yourself right now.
Well, let me ask you, why do you think that there are people who might have that impression that taking a rest somehow is bad? There's some judgment around how we numb out if we decide to do that, even temporarily.
Well, I think because our whole culture is designed to do that. So what's interesting to me is like one of the biggest ones we use is shopping, right? We go out, we buy something, we feel better. It's like our version of hunting, or exploring or adventuring. Like we get a little dopamine hit when we buy a new sweater, a new pair of shoes. We get the same thing when we buy, when we eat some food. So we've had a ton of coping mechanisms. We've had a ton of ways that we've numbed ourselves from what's going on in the world. And so when 90% of what we're doing is numbing ourselves from the world, and then absolutely we want to decrease that. But right now, when you're home potentially by yourself or with a partner and kids, which I've seen a lot of my folks have been doing, you might need a little break. So this is one of those places where it's okay to just take some time. Now, if you spent like 2 weeks of a quarantine or 4 weeks, and it was funny when I was in Portland, as I'm in Florida right now, but when I was in Portland before this all kind of got as crazy as it's gotten, I was going to the grocery store and I had this woman near me over onto my right, and she was literally filling her entire cart up with wine. There were probably
Wine.
40 bottles of wine in her cart. And I was like, okay, I know what she's going to be doing for the next couple weeks.
She's
So
really numbing out.
yeah, that's probably too much. Like we want to be compassionate. Like I've been loving what my mom's doing. So I came home to stay with my family and take care of them some. They're making surgical masks.
Mm.
They just decided today, they realized one of the um, agencies that helps older people feel connected, and does like home visits was shut down today. And so they said,
Uh,
she's a part of an organization. They said, you know what, we can call people, we can reach out and connect. And so we can just check in on these people who are not getting calls. So I think there's opportunities to do some numbing out, but also do some work in service. And part of the reason I'm always encouraging people to do work in service is because fear lives right here in this tiny little bubble of ourselves.
mhm.
As soon as I start to think about you or the people who need masks or the people who need food, I actually expand my container so that the anxiousness, the overwhelm, the fear, even though it might still be running in me, it has a much bigger playing field. So it doesn't need to take over all the space.
I love this imagery about using our vessel, our body as a container, right? That there's a contraction of it, like you mentioned, in fear, be in stress, and then that we have some choices that we can make and actions that we take that will help us expand it. I found even for myself, we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but I wanted to bring this up around the reaction to fear often, and I said fight, fright, fright, was it fight, flight, or freeze? And then you added a new one to the mix for me, and that was faint. So I wanted to hear more about that because there's so many pieces of information right now flying from places where it's like, take your, chill, it's fine, we're handling it, to we're about to run, there's no ventilators and you can get it from the air. So there's so much information out there, some helpful, some not, but all of it has some sort of emotional or physiological reaction to it. So I'm curious about how do you break that down for us, and what might be
Yeah.
happening internally?
So the work you're talking about, I've got really lucky and got to study with Katie Hendricks, who is the brilliant wife of Gay Hendricks. They've written tons of books together and books on their own. And Katie is just so incredibly smart. So I was working with her a few weeks ago down in LA before all this stuff broke out. And she's the one that introduced me to Faint. And I was like, oh, this is so smart. So anybody who's listening and they want to go look for her work, she has a course on fear at the Foundation for Conscious Living, and you can get this whole course for free. It's amazing work. But what she was sharing with us, and this is something that I think is really helpful for people to know, is we all have kind of a different way we process fear. So fear comes from our bodies. That's the first thing to know. So it's not usually in our heads first. It's some kind of triggered response where we have a sense of danger. Now that's going off for everybody a lot right now. So part of what we have to do is really get grounded back in our resourcefulness so we can realize, is this something I can be afraid of? I need to be afraid of? Is there something I can do? So if you're sitting home watching CNN all day long, you're going to be probably freaking out and you're going to need that 40 bottles of wine. You probably go through it in a day. But if you're maintaining some distance, like I only read the news instead of watching it because it decreases the emotional response, the triggers. But back to this question of the fear signature. So we've got a couple things we can do. We can fight. You know, if you get afraid, there's some of us who come out swinging. Don't mess with me, right? I'm afraid, but I'm not going to show you. I'm going to be like a little mouse that's going to fight you. My little dog's kind of like that. We can freeze, which a lot of animals in the wild will just freeze. You know, and part of why they do that is there's other animals that can't see unless you're moving. So like if you have a snake and a stick, if the snake isn't moving, it just looks like a stick. We might freeze. We might flee, which is to run out. You know, we might get away as fast as we can. And we can do that internally as well. So for some of us, like if we're sitting there and I'm talking to you, Valerie, and you say something that upsets me, I might just completely disconnect, like float off into space, and I'm here with you, but I'm not really. We've all done that sometimes. Like, I'm not listening to this bozo anymore. And then the last one is faint, which faint is in Katie's system is when we just give all our energy away. So we just kind of collapse. And usually that doesn't look, you know, if you look at me, you might not notice, but it's just like all of my energy is dropped out through the floor. I think that's happening a lot for people right now. So one of the things Katie taught, and I'll just give you a quick version of this, is each one of these, you usually have two that go in order, but they have physiological responses, things that you can do to get outside of them. So I learned for me, I tend to freeze first. You know, it's like, and sometimes we look like we're freezing, other times we're just shutting down.
Yeah.
And Katie says, you know, if you get into freeze, just wiggle, shake, move your hands and your feet and your toes a little bit so that you can remind your body who's in charge. So you can remind your body that your conscious mind is running the show. Your critter brain doesn't need to be in charge right now. If you are fighting, what does she do for fighting? It's just soothing yourself. That's not one that I do. I'm not a fighter. So just soothe, allow yourself to calm a little bit. For flee, which is another one that I tend to fall into, she does what she calls the sumo wrestler, and you just ground down. Like you've seen those sumo wrestlers who are like
bear down, yeah.
You know? So you just let your feet ground into the earth, your knees bend a little bit, and then you can move. So if somebody were to push you, you'd still be in balance. And faint, you'll actually have to watch her recording. My brain is just blanking on what she said to do with faint, because that's not one I relate to either. But each one of these has physiological responses you can do. One of the ones that I taught, and you and I were talking about, that anybody can do no matter what's going on for them, is this very simple self-soothing gesture. And if you're watching, try this on for just a minute. It takes 2 minutes to get your body out of fear and back into a resourceful place. And if you just take your hand, and I usually start at my neck, right below my little collarbone here, and I just move down all the way to just below your belly button, and you just breathe. Now, this seems like it would do nothing. You're like, why am I telling you to do this? But you're actually tracing the vagus nerve that's right under here. Your parasympathetic nervous system is able to go, oh, it's okay. Everything's fine. And we get a little reset. You can probably notice like there's part of you that wants to go and have a big breath. So if you're feeling in a fearful place, this is one of the easiest resets that anybody can do. 2 minutes of doing that, I set my phone. I have a little timer that goes off with chimes. So it's not like a, you know, it's just
back into fear.
Yeah, like I don't want to restart. Oh, I did my 2 minutes, and now I got to do 2 minutes again. Let me change my mind. So anything we can do to move the energy in the body is going to help us.
One thing that I love what you're saying, because you're giving really practical ways for us to address the instinctive, like that human instinct to protect ourselves, which is what those 4 systems do, right? Those 4 elements in the system do. What I'm curious though is sometimes we're not even aware, because there is so much cognitive dissonance, perhaps. There's so many messages coming in so quickly, and if we're connected to social media, if we're watching CNN and we're reading the banners and we're getting the newspaper. And so how do you actually know that you're reacting to fear? Like, how would we know in our bodies or in our minds or in our emotions that is a reaction to fear that we would need to then soothe?
Yeah, so it's funny. I went grocery shopping right before I left Portland, and it was so, like, I was relaxed when I went. I walked down, you know, it was open air, it was a beautiful day, and I was in the Trader Joe's shopping around. People were being very polite, but I left the store feeling like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I was like, I was almost feeling panic, and that's not something I'm prone to. Like,
Mm.
I'm not a panicky person. I'm usually pretty grounded. And I got out of the store and I was like, what's going on? I was thinking, I need to move to Costa Rica. I need to get out of the country. Like, I was like,
Mm.
all these thoughts popping through. And I realized that what I was doing was reacting to other people's energy. Um, which is something that a lot of people are doing right now. All those things you said are coming at you. And I had to stop for a minute. And usually, if we can just have a simple awareness practice, just something very, very simple to check in with ourselves. So I asked first, is this mine or not mine? So that's the first thing that's really useful for you to ask. Is this mine or not mine? So in that case, it actually wasn't mine. Most of that panic, anxiety, it was from people shopping, with like as many carts as they could get, as many
Yeah.
food things, because there's this primal fear going on right now
Mm-hmm.
of, will I survive? Anybody who's ever had any threat to their survival, any kind of questionable like safety, which is honestly most of us have had a little bit, and some people have had a ton. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a thimble full or a swimming pool full, all that's getting activated. So it's not uncommon for a little bit of fear of ours to get like then all of a sudden
Yeah.
partnered up with all that other fear. So just noticing first mine or not mine. And then the second thing to notice is this fear something in this moment I can do something about? Is this feeling? So if I get all pent up, like I'm like, oh, I've got to do something, or, like get a lot of energy is usually how this shows up. Like literally feeling like it's lifting me up. I've got to run. I've got to do something. Then I can just notice, is this something I need to respond to immediately? So that response from the critter brain is really useful when a tiger is chasing us, or we're walking down an alley at night and there's some weird vibe or somebody walking behind us and you're like, I don't know, I don't want to be in this alley. That's the place that's useful. But right
Mm-hmm.
now it's running for people all the time, especially if we're watching these news shows. So just noticing it, well, I can't do anything about the people in Michigan right now,
Mm.
but I've maybe just watched a news report about how they need help. Now, if I can calm myself down and I can just notice, okay, this is fear coming up from something I'm not able to affect in this moment, that there's no immediate danger coming at me,
Mm-hmm.
and I can soothe for a moment. Anytime you can do this and it relaxes you, it's fear coming up, it's something going on. So this is just a good standby. Um, and then I can actually, from a much more resourceful brain perspective, ask myself, is there something I can do to help those people in Michigan who need help right now? But
Mm-hmm.
it's got to come from the resourceful place versus like the fear place of, oh my God, what if we're next? What if there's no respirators? What if there's no masks? What if like everybody I know is dying? Which is terrifying. And these are normal thoughts for people to have. So that's the other thing I just want to, I can't stress enough to be gentle with yourself, to know that this is normal, to know that like if you have a little freak out, you have a little panic, just to go, okay, cool. This is a time of such global weirdness that and instability, that it's okay to have experiences that are feeling unstable. But what you want to be able to do is get back to resourcefulness as quickly as you can, because all that's going to do, having those little panics, those freakouts, is going to drain your energy and make you feel worse, actually hurt your immune system. Like, so the best way you can stay healthy, I mean, obviously taking in all the social distancing and like keeping yourself like the hands and all the things that they're suggesting, but to keep your immune system safe, the best thing we can do is to decrease our stress, to really keep ourselves calm and grounded.
I love how you're referring to this as global weirdness.
Yeah.
The two thoughts that came up to me as you were describing this notion of, is this something I can do, like something I need to do, whether it's mine or not, is one, the responsibility that we have in how we nurture a particular thought or a particular emotion. So clearly there's a purpose for reading the paper, watching the news. And when that same source is creating some of that same anxiety, perhaps, how do we manage how we nurture being informed, balancing being informed and responsible versus perhaps nurturing some of the fear or stress that's created as a result?
Yeah, it's funny. I got really good training the first year of our current administration, because for a year, literally a year, I woke up every morning and checked the news. And I checked the news all day long, like usually 3, 4, 5 times, because I was convinced we would be in a war by the end of the day. I mean, I was not the only one who was really freaked out. The world stopped making sense to me for a while. And what I learned in that process was I was not helping anybody by checking that often. But what I was doing was I was self-soothing, and a lot of us do this. We're thinking like, I must know what's going on. I'm really afraid. Things are crazy. And I had to make a choice to say like, well, how much information do I really need? And the choice I made, and everybody's going to make their own choice, but I made a choice that I could read the news once a day, and that if something calamitous happened, like really big, probably my cell phone would have blown up with texts. We'd see something, somebody would call me. And so I just started, first of all, only reading the news, because most of our news is designed to activate every fear center you have. It's designed to be addictive. So one of the funny things I think about watching a lot of the news channels is if you watch them and then you go to Vegas, you'll notice they run on the same principles. Bright lights, like all kinds of things moving, because our brains are trained to pay attention to things that move, not things that are still, things that are bright versus things that are not. We've got like sounds coming up, sound effects, special effects, like all of these things are designed to get us to keep like, oh, I've got to be closer. I've got to know what's going on. So that was the first thing, is to notice like that watching was actually increasing the anxiety. And so it was better for me to just read. And I read 3 aggregate sources every day. So I look at Google News, I look at HuffPost, and I look at CNN, and then I look at Apple News. Apple News is a little less lately because of the way they're organized. But I just look at those sources in the morning. A lot of times there's repeats, but sometimes there's coverage. Like I look at Google News because it covers my hometown a little better. And in about 45 minutes, I can get pretty informed.
Yeah.
And that's all I need to do.
I found myself in the same state. I don't have a television anymore. It's been about almost 2 years. Gave that up. I do have several other devices though. I have the tablet and I have the laptop and all that good stuff. What I do though is NPR is generally my source. There's a 15-minute podcast that gives me just the top of the day news. That gives me, and then I also love to see the humor side of news. So I admit I'm a huge Trevor Noah fan. So I watch the Daily Show daily, or the Daily Social Distancing Show, as he's calling it now, because regardless of what people's politics are, I find that there's got to be something to be joyful about in anything we watch, and also intellectually stimulating, right? And so I love the clever humor, and that's one of the reasons I have those two as a balance. And you're right, I would probably my phone will blow up the moment that something crazy happens. Did you hear about? And what I've had to manage is my fear of missing out, where I'm like, why didn't I know this? Or you said Michigan, like you said something about Michigan just now, and I'm like, I haven't heard anything about Michigan. Was he just using that as an example? Did something happen? So I had to like, just chill. You'll find out if something happened when we get off this session. But
yeah, and the other thing I want to point out in here that I love that you're saying is there's a couple things. One is anywhere we can introduce a little bit of lightness, it's going to help us be less stressed. And I really want people to know I'm not saying ignore what's going on, but I'm saying you can be informed and you can still tell a joke at dinner. You can still read a funny, like a comic. You can still watch a fun movie. Like it's important for us to continue to allow light to come into our lives, because it would be very easy to just feel glum and dark and the world is ending. But we've had periods of that many, many times in our history. We can support the efforts to make things better without having to be collapsed underneath the horrible news in so many places. So that's one piece. And the other piece I want to just note with here is it's also really important to find the places we can be grateful. So I've been doing this little experiment, which has been very interesting. I drove out to Florida from Portland. I hadn't had a car in years, and I decided to buy one so I could bring stuff, so I could be here for however long this lasted. And so, I'm used to having this much bigger place with lots of stuff. And I've been looking to see, well, what is it that I really need? And I've been having this gratitude practice where I say, okay, well, how many running shoes do I need? Just as an example. I'm like, so I was thinking, okay, well, if I were to just need to run like one pair of running shoes, but I have three, wow, I'm so grateful that I have three pairs of running shoes. Then I looked at t-shirts and I'm like, how many t-shirts do I need to live comfortably? I have like 40 with me. I'm like, because I kind of felt like this might be the end of the world when I was packing in like a few hours. I better take every t-shirt. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, which is an easy place to get into. And
You
packed in a
fly
few.
in style.
Yeah, I was like, I need to have really nice outfits to wear during a quarantine. Who the hell needs that? But anyway, for some reason, I needed that in my because I basically decided to come back on a Monday evening, went and bought a car, and left by 2 o'clock the next day. Um, so for a 5-day car trip to get across country, it's pretty crazy. But I looked and I'm like, okay, what are the things that I have? And so many of us, we have gone so far over enough that we have forgotten how abundant we are and how much gratitude we can express. So for every person who's listening who has a healthy body right now, there is so much to be grateful for. Like just like sitting here going, right now my body is healthy. Right now I can breathe without assistance. Right now I'm alive. Like if I just started there as a baseline, we have so much to be grateful for because there's people who cannot say that's true for them.
Absolutely.
Then we can move to like, I have a place to stay. I have people who love me. I have people I love. Like all of these things. And one of the things that I've been, in the midst of this pandemic that I've been hopeful about is I think, as I've been talking to people around the world, I was mentioning this to you earlier, and since before, it hit as strongly in the US, I keep talking to people who are saying to me, I'm reevaluating life. I'm starting to think about what's really important. And you know what? My 15th sweater is not as important as spending time with my family. Or all of these things that I'm used to buying, because we're having this huge pattern interrupt in our culture. All of these ways that we've organized our life are for at least a temporary period being set aside. And when that happens, we actually get a chance to say, well, is this important to me? Is the way I've been living important to me? I talked to a woman the other day, a phenomenal woman from Denver, who said, I work at a car dealership. I hate the work I do. It doesn't make me happy. And she's now saying, like, on the other side of this, I want to be rethinking what I'm doing in my life. And I'm hearing that from so many people. I'm hearing people say, it's really like I'm realizing how vulnerable we are as humans. I want to spend more time with people I love. I want to be more connected. That, things that I'm doing aren't actually important. They're just noise. So to me, that's one of the hopeful moments that we have an opportunity to reevaluate and decide what's noise and what's really important.
I really love that. And I think what I can really hear is the appreciation that we would have to consciously choose that. We get to consciously choose gratitude. We get to consciously choose to be in service, right? Those are all choices that are generated from us. They don't have to be, you don't have to go purchase it. You don't have to order it on Amazon and be on back order. You literally can, in an instant, right? We can decide those. I want to switch gears a little bit because, obviously we're talking about the health right now, the health portion of the fear. But as a result of some of that fear, our economy has also been taking a huge hit. I really think about the leaders in our organizations who have to make decisions about who to keep, who to let go, right? You're talking about how many t-shirts you should take. There are people having to decide how many staff members do we need to keep? What do we stop ordering? What services do we provide? Can you talk a little bit about how all of this could also be applied to those types of decisions that leaders might be able to benefit from?
Wow. So this is a huge question
I
because,
know.
and I don't know that I have any answers, but what I can offer, I was really excited to see a couple CEOs make a choice to decrease their pay. I think REI is one of the companies that's doing this. So the CEO, and I've seen a couple companies that have now followed suit, but REI's CEO said, I'm just going to take, I think it's like $10,000 a year salary, and they've kept the employees on. So I'm seeing companies that are making hard choices in favor of their workers. New York Life seems to be doing something similar. And I'm not tracking a ton of companies, but the companies that have been seeing where they're really holding both their employees and the bottom line, so that they're not just saying, oh, this is the financially, expedient decision. But I think this is such a hard place to make those decisions. I've seen this with small business owners. I've seen this with larger companies, where because we don't know what's happening, it's really hard to make choices. Somebody asked me what I'm doing next week. I'm like, like it's hard to know, because we don't know where this virus is going to be. We don't know how the whole culture is going to change. So so the best advice that I have, or the best that I can offer, is that we have to be finding ways to be gentle with each other and recognize that these are hard decisions for everybody, and it's a hard place to be. My heart particularly goes out to people who are folks like in the service industry, and who are, have lost jobs and income, and they're really in a super bind right now. So what I keep looking at is, how can I be in support of people who are in a place that feels much more precarious than me? And I think, one of the great things about America, it's interesting to see the things that I do really appreciate, is we have a culture of helping each other. And we've had a long history of that. And for a couple of years, we've had a weird, we're fighting with our family at the table. We're saying, oh, you like this, I like this, I like, I feel like we're in the Dr. Seuss book a lot of times, the butter side up, butter side down book. We're arguing about things that aren't important. And ultimately what I'm seeing people do is come back to the table and say, what is important is health. What's important is family. What's important is connection. What's important is knowing that our friends have food to eat right now, that our friends have places to stay. So that's where I go, more than the big picture, like how do people make economic decisions, but rather how do we support each other? Because I still continue to believe there's enough for all of us. We just may have to distribute some of that a little differently. And most of it, I said I have all these t-shirts. I could give some of those t-shirts away. I could support other people with some food. All of those are options.
I think what I'm getting to from you is the fact that there is whether we're making decisions that will impact an entire industry, will impact an entire organization, or impact a whole community, it comes back to that individual and the state of mind in which that individual makes the decision. Right. So if we're making it out of some sort of one of those fear systems that we mentioned, the fight, flight, freeze, faint, the decision is not likely to be very empowering for the individual, or likely for the people that they're hoping to support. But it sounds like there's also a measure of gratitude that one could stop and say, okay, what are we grateful for? What have we achieved? And what has our organization or our team, or right? And then also how can we serve each other, all the stakeholders are involved. I think that's really what I'm getting in here. So switching gears to those individuals who are impacted, I really had a wake-up call the other day, because I've been working from home for the last 10 plus years. I'm a coach. A lot of my work can be done remotely. There are obviously some impact on how much I get to do outside, and meetings or events that have been canceled as a result of this. But essentially, my system hasn't changed that much. My day-to-day, fairly simple. But when I have conversations with friends who've been laid off, that from one day to the next, literally their entire livelihoods have been compromised, that now have to make different decisions for their family, for themselves, to survive this. What can those individuals, what can we all do when we're having to make some of those financial decisions? When people are flooding all sorts of lines, trying to get bills put on hold and, make payments. So how do we get to a space in our brain and physiologically where we can be empowered also in those situations?
So the first thing I think that's important is to, sometimes what happens for us in a time of crisis, change, kind of chaos, is this moment collapses into every moment. Meaning this moment feels like the entire rest of our lives. So some of us, we literally don't know what's happening this week. So to make any kind of big picture thought, like, oh my God, my income just decreased. I feel like I'm going to get thrown out of my house. I'm not going to have food. That may or may not be true. What I know is we can hang with 60 seconds. So this is one of the tools I use when people are in a place of panic, when they're in a place of super stress. If we can just do 60 seconds at a time, which seems a little crazy, but we honestly don't know what's going to happen next week right now. We do know that there is support coming.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of it is too slow and people need some help right away. So my hope is in that meantime, while people are waiting for hope, those of us who have a little bit more resources in the moment, and here's what I want you to think about. When I say resources, it doesn't mean money necessarily. It means we all have a lot of things, like not everybody, but those of us who do, if you can do an inventory of your time, your energy, your food stocks, like it might be that you're going to make some food and share it with somebody. It might be that you're going to reach out and call a friend who feels like they're in crisis. It might be that you loan somebody $25 that can help them pay the rent this month or cover something that, and it's so easy for all of us to get in this mode of like survival thinking where we better not share anything because it could be the end of the world. You know, it's our toilet paper dilemma right now.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd bring that one up.
Yeah, I better not like share because this is making sure I'm okay. And I get it. Like I really want people to be gentle with themselves when that comes up, because that's our critter brain going like, I got to make sure I'm safe. That is a very normal response. Now the choice is, do we want to hang out in that place or do we want to step into more resourcefulness? Because it's open to us. And my invitation is when you hit the place where you feel like that critter brain is taking over, just if you can get out of it, just let yourself be gentle and not to judge yourself, because it's so easy to be like, I can't believe I did that. I'm being awful. I should be giving more.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, you know what? I had a momentary lapse. I had a moment of feeling really scared. I had a moment of wondering what might happen next because none of us know. And I think the more we can be gentle with each other and with ourselves, the easier we can come out of that place and we can recognize the ways we can support others. So, and I mean, that's what I was saying about the US. I think one of the beautiful things, and it's not just the US, I think so many countries are so amazing at this. But what I have seen, like I lived through 9/11, like so many of us did, the 2008 recession, like so many of us did, the Hurricane Katrina, you know, all of these times when there's a crisis, we are really good at giving to others. In fact, I was listening to, I got to interview Lynn Twist not too long ago. He wrote this beautiful book,
Golden
this
Money.
yeah, powerful book. If people haven't read it, it's really worth reading. And Lynn Twist was telling me that, I can't remember the exact statistic, but I think it's something like 78% of the giving in the US is done by people who make like less than $100,000 a year. So not the 1%. You know, it's not foundations, it's not the super wealthy. It's people who are making $25,000, $30,000 a year who are giving a few dollars at a time, who are donating some canned goods. They generate 87%, somewhere around there, of the charitable giving. So we're really good at giving when we know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think some of the panic, if we can just like drop down and say, what's mine to do in this moment? How can I be of service? Like I was saying earlier in the call, that actually expands us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just focused, you know, we call it navel gazing sometimes, or focused on ourselves and our own survival. You know, we can think like, oh, can I help make face masks? You know, if you're able to sew, if you're able to make calls, can I make phone calls and check on people? If you're able, like in this neighborhood, you know, where my mom is, there's a lot of people who are much older, and I can go get groceries for them when the service isn't there, and I can drop it off at their door. You can do it very safely, you know, drop off the door, don't even meet them outside. You know, that's something I could do that they may not be able to do. Even the simple act of just calling a friend, you know, and reaching out to them if they might be in need, especially if they're not used to working from home. We were joking a little earlier that you and I are both Gen Xers, and Gen X is the generation we've been, you know, we're home. Like, yeah, we came home, we turned our little key in the door, we watched TV, you know, that was our thing. So, but there's so many people who are millennials or boomers or, you know, any of the generations that have not been so used to that. That if you know somebody who's an older person or a younger person, just to reach out and make a connection. And I've witnessed so many beautiful things. You know, I'll share one. My dear friends, the brothers Corin, so Isaac and Torald Corin, who have a band called The Kin. And The Kin is phenomenal. They toured with Pink, they toured with Coldplay. They've been doing a 5 o'clock concert every day. You know, it's not super long, but they're just doing a concert online. Jimmy Fallon's been doing, you know, his show from his home.
Yeah.
I'm watching people do meditation with people. I'm watching another friend, Star Ladin, who's this phenomenal human being who is down in LA, has been doing this social hour for people. So like you could actually get together and work if you were you're not used to being home by yourself. There's
Mm.
so many opportunities that don't require money. They just require attention, compassion, kindness, love. And the cool thing is, as soon as we're focused on other people, we expand. So we
Absolutely.
move a little bit. So yeah.
I have a group of friends, very diverse group of friends. We call ourselves an international party crew because we are all from so many different cultures and backgrounds. And we had a happy hour on last Friday evening for like 2.5 hours. We hung out on Zoom in our respective homes. We had someone as far as Korea, and we just chatted, and people's kids came online and we said hello, and it was really wonderful. Some people had their meal, some people had their wine. I mean, it was just an opportunity for us to connect. And in our conversation, we all shared, well, what are we doing? How are we handling this? And what came up for me was, I'm really great at having conversations with people. I just want to go have some conversations. So my policy has been, if I think of your name, you're going to get a phone call or a text from me. So whoever shows up, even if it's somebody that I haven't thought of in months or years, perhaps. Now, don't all get offended if I don't reach out to everybody. It doesn't mean that you haven't been on my mind. It's just that right now there's a limited amount of time. But I love that notion that we all have something to offer. And it doesn't necessarily have to come from a place of lack or a place of that survival mechanism, that we can really look at where we can be generous with our time, with our energy, with our physical ability, perhaps our talent. There's one of my coaching clients, actually, she loves coloring books. I just learned this about her because I called just to say hello. And she took some pictures, and I'm like, you colored this? It looks like a work of art. So I asked her, hey, can you make one for me? I would love to have one. And so that is a way of service. There's a gift, like you said, the concert.
I want to mention something really specific here around this texting versus calling thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was working with somebody the other day who said to me, I said, I want you to just think about calling a few people. And he said, I don't call anybody. My friends just text. And that's apparently very common for younger people. I'm getting old, so I remember before we had text, we didn't telegraph people, which is really what that would have been my day. But what I know is, for people who are used to just texting, I want to encourage you to actually break that mold a little bit, because what we know about the way people receive connection,
Mm-hmm.
texts are on the very bottom. Then we have phone calls, then we have video calls where we can see each other, and then we have in-person connection, which is obviously the top. So if we're missing a lot of in-person connection, where people have been going to work, and if you go to work all day, you're at school all day, it's different to just receive texts back and forth because you have a ton of social connection happening. But if all of a sudden people who are used to being in those environments now have nobody to talk to, they have nobody to get on a phone call with, it makes an enormous difference to get a 15-minute call from somebody like you, Valerie, who's just saying, hey, just call to check up on you. Even if it's weird. And I told him, I said, just risk being weird in the middle of a global pandemic. Weird everywhere. Let's just let ourselves be a little weird in support and in service of our fellow humans. So
I think that's a t-shirt you should create on one of your 40 t-shirts. Risk being weird in the face of a global pandemic.
I'm going to write that down.
Yes. I get 30%, Scott. It's so interesting because, yeah, you're right. This is a time where, wow, if there's any time in the world where we can be weird, when we can go outside of our comfort zone, when we can explore how to be creative, how to make something work, this is a time to do it. So I totally feel you. I do feel that there's some opportunity in a lot of the ways in which we work, the ways in which we parent, and the ways in which we connect with our friends. There's so many opportunities to start doing things that are unconventional, that are unorthodox, that might be really outside of our own sphere of comfort, that I think are huge. Let's talk. I keep wanting to touch every subject with you because I'm like, you're just an expert in all things related to emotion and brain. let's talk a little bit about those who are perhaps in close quarters with others who they're not accustomed to. So you mentioned people who are used to getting social stimulation outside, and they're meeting different people and they're able to choose those spaces. Now you're home majority of the time and you're trying to get work done and you have children with you or you have your spouse and all these things are happening. How does one soothe, or how does one connect with themselves in a way that they can then be effective in all of these different relationships?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Part of what I've been watching is couples, particularly, like if you both leave your home and you're working somewhere else and you might have friends afterwards, so you don't spend all your time together. And all of a sudden these couples have been thrust together and they're like looking across going like, oh my God, I'm not used to spending near this much time. Um, and then you add children into the mix who are used to going to school, and this can get really tricky. So in my mind, there's a couple things that we can do. One is, just really start at the center of being gentle with each other and recognizing everybody is feeling some tension and some anxiety. Everybody's wondering what's going on in the world. So nobody's going to be graceful and perfect right now. Nobody's going to be graceful and perfect all the time anyway, but this is a time where we really need to be soft with each other. So that's the first place. It's just to recognize we're all going through a lot. Second thing is to find ways that you can self-soothe, even if they're very small. Now, one of the things we talked about at the beginning of the call is it only takes 2 minutes to get us back into a place of groundedness. So that might be 2 minutes in the bathroom where you just go, I'm just going to go in the bathroom for 2 minutes. I'm going to do my self-soothing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do some breath. Maybe you can do a breath in that's 6 breaths, hold 2, release for 4. You can Google those. There's plenty of like breathwork folks that you can get. That's something you can do for 30 seconds to 2 minutes. You'll feel better. So finding what works for you and creating little pockets of grounding. So that's the second thing I would offer. And the third thing that I would offer is in families or people who are, even if it's housemates, who are all of a sudden like 3, 4 housemates together, really being open in your conversation, your communication about how you're feeling affected and what good boundaries are for you. So this is an opportunity to really ask for more than you're used to, listen to other people. So if somebody says, I just really need space in the morning, help figure out some ways to do that. Like, is that a little area of your room you can call the quiet space of your house? There's some negotiation to go on here because our patterns of life have changed radically. So we have to start looking at, for the next couple weeks, while we're home together, how do we organize so everybody gets to have some of their needs met? And also, how do we have enough wiggle room so that we recognize we can't have all of our needs met? We're going to have a little bit of a balance to go there.
What came to mind when you said having a space that is kind of like an, out of order area is like a timeout zone. I almost saw people deciding, right, making some negotiating with one another and deciding, okay, this particular part of the house, if you're sitting in that chair or if you're in this room, that means that you just need a break from everybody. So no one's allowed to go in there. No one's allowed to, right? So for whatever time you're in, that's the time that you need. I love that notion because it does put the responsibility on the individual to communicate clearly, right, what the needs, like you said, or the boundaries are, which I think this is an opportunity for us like never before to do just that when we're in close quarters. I find I'm by myself. I live alone. And so a lot of my needs are met through connecting like this on Zoom. So I've reached out to my family and I said, I need to see and talk to you guys at least once a week. So we do a little family Zoom call on Friday evenings and we get a chance to catch up. And that for me is an opportunity. But having to express that, even something like that, and I do call randomly as needed. I want to do a quick shout out. My sister-in-law, Eva, who I've mentioned to you, she was a student in the Money EQ course, and her husband, my brother, put online recently, they were dancing to some boleros, some slow songs, and they just, I think, live streamed for 30 seconds or something. And it created such a beautiful picture just to see them just spending time doing something, showing that gentleness that you're talking about, moment of gentleness. I don't know if they're tearing each other's hair out in between, but those 30 seconds really showed what one could experience in being together like this?
Yeah, I want to throw a couple of things into this mix, two in particular. One is I think there's a huge opportunity in this time of social distancing to actually connect deeper. So that's one of the invitations. I'm really thinking that we have a possibility to listen to each other more deeply. We have a little bit more time right now. Like people aren't commuting. If you took your commute time and you're like, hey, what am I going to do with this? Um, so it's funny because I've gotten a few things where I was like, I'm going to start some hobbies. So I bought a little ukulele, and I play guitar already, but I'm learning how to play ukulele. I have, you got, I see yours over there. I decided I would start knitting. Just find some things that support you in a way that you can still be creative, even in your small space. The other thing I want to mention is that it's not just the quiet space, because sometimes people need more quiet, but sometimes people in a household need more connection. So we might want to have multiple kinds of spaces. One of the things that kids have done on playgrounds, quite a few playgrounds have what they're calling buddy benches now. And so if you are a kid, like say you're 5, 6, 7, and you need a friend to come play with you, they've been putting these benches, and they literally call them buddy benches, and you just go sit on the bench and somebody will come and play with you. It's such a beautiful concept. So at the same time that we're looking for places like these are the quiet areas, I also think we want to say, here's the areas, especially if you're in a household, that this is the place where we name this is the connection area, because it could be very easy for a lot of families, especially if they're in a home with multiple rooms. You have your bedroom, the kids have a bedroom, whatever, for us just to go in our rooms and isolate for this period, and everybody takes their little screen and watches their Netflix. But there's times where we're going to want to play a game, or we're going to do a puzzle, or we're going to have dinner together. We've been doing that quite often. I can hear my family is out having dinner now. I said eat without me because it's going to go late. But I think we want to make sure that there's spaces where we name this is the connection space, and we're also naming times for that. So whether it's we eat together, even though we've been together all day, people are like, oh, there's nothing to talk about. That's okay. Let's just spend some time with each other. You could do a little circle around the table of something you're grateful for today, something you learned today, just some way that like we can be connected. Because I think that's really important in this period for kids who have lost their social network with their friends, for example, for parents or for adults who are used to going to work, and have those connections. We're missing a lot of our stability. So, and for those of us like you and I, those of us who already work from home, we're not changing patterns radically. But for so many people, everything just got shaken up in the Yahtzee shaker.
Yep.
Somebody went, woo, I'm going to throw out the dice of your life. And you're going to all of a sudden need to figure out, things like, it's so funny because when people start working from home, they're like, oh, can I wear pajamas to work? I'm like, no, you still need a schedule. You need to dress so your brain is anchored into working, but those are a lot of things to figure out, and change is stressful. So just really thinking through all of the ways we can support each other.
I think what you also are pointing to is the fact that we can just stop, and the gentleness really calls out to me. If we can just stop judging what should be happening, like how it should go, how I should work, who I should connect with, who I should, right? And just pause the judgment and just to see, well, what's the need? What's the need first for myself? Am I feeling really overwhelmed and stressed? How do I just slow it down enough to get anchored, to be soothed, to be centered? But then also, how do I then express gratitude and then serve? And it feels like every layer that you're sharing is almost like you're peeling off a certain weight or expectation. And the less weight we have, psychic or emotional or physical weight, the more we're able to then release, right? That container that you talked about. You mentioned that you have some real practical ways for people to mitigate this fear. And I'd love to, I know you mentioned the soothing exercise, the breathing. Are there any other exercises that you could share with us or even demonstrate that would help?
Let me think about that for a second. The easiest thing to do, honestly, is I just had an hour and a half like sequence with this. And if you go to scottwmills.com/together we love. So that's scottwmills.com/together we love. That's where I'm putting out most of this. And I've been trying to do as many free things with people to help them learn some skills. It looks like a sign up page, but if you actually look right below the sign up, you'll see there's a video recording of the last one I did. So it's 90 minutes of just exercises, which I can't do 90 minutes now,
Perfect.
but that's a great place to start. Second thing, let's see what we could do in just a few minutes. So we've talked about the self-soothing here. We've talked about breath, which is really important. Third thing I encourage people to do is to have a list in advance of ways that they can take care of themselves. So that if in case of emergency, so that's thinking through like, what actually does let me reset? So if for you a hot bath and a book by yourself is your reset, great. For me, a lot of this has been binaural rhythms that I listen to on noise canceling headphones. So that lets me have quiet space. Yeah, the exercises are a little tricky to teach.
Or meditation.
A little more time. Yeah, I would just say go to that site
Okay.
and get those exercises. I'm just watching my time too, and I'm realizing I'm just right at the end of our time.
Yes, we're wrapping it up.
Yeah, so that would, let me see if there's one thing I could teach you that would be really simple and easy. One of the things you can do, really simple thing, and it'll sound funny, but most of our fear is actually thinking about things outside of ourselves. So our body triggers the fear, and then all of a sudden what we do is we start thinking about all the things that have happened in the past that we're trying to avoid again, and all the things that are happening in the future that like could happen in the future. So one of the easiest things to do, the immediate, is literally like I'm sitting in my seat and I can put my feet on the ground and I can do what we call just simply finding my butt. Like, oh, it's on the seat. Okay, cool. Feel my sense of balance. And then I can take some deep breaths. This is a very simple thing you can do. But try it right now. And I would, again, I've said 2 minutes a lot, but I'd set a timer for 2 minutes and just check in with every part of your body in this 2-minute period. So you can start at the top of your head. And I actually like to touch the top of my head. Some people just say, think of the top of your head. I'm very physical. I'm like, cool. I'm just checking with my top of my head. Thank you. I can do a little thank you. I can think, I know we're not supposed to touch our faces, so you can put your hands in front of your face if you like, and just acknowledge, thank you, respiratory system, thank you, mouth, check how your chest is doing, check your belly, and you're just checking in with each part of yourself. Checking in with the legs, with the knees, the lower legs, all the way down to the feet. And what you'll notice is as you do this really simple thing, and I go for the simple things, because if I try to teach complex things, quickly people will go, oh yeah, I'm going to remember that, and they'll not do it. But you can remember these things like breathing, self-soothing, checking in with parts of your body. And what you're doing, the reason I have people do these things is because the more we can become present to our body in this moment, the more we can notice we're okay. That's really what that's about. It's going, okay, cool. My heart is okay in this moment. I might feel a little afraid, but I'm okay. My belly's okay. I've got enough food. My legs are okay. I'm still touching the ground. I'm still connected to my seat. And it's literally back to this notion of 60 seconds at a time. So when you're in that place of spin out, if we can just get back into this present moment, which Louise Hay used to say that the present moment is your point of power. It's the only place you have an opportunity to change something. So if we can get back in the present moment and we can get back into our resourceful bodies, then we actually have an opportunity to make some choices that are different than, oh my gosh, I'm just going to stay in panic all day. Or, oh my gosh, I'm going to lay on the couch and drink wine and eat chips all day. Do that for an hour or two if you need to. But then also think about taking a walk. Think about, which we can still do in most places. You can get out and take a walk, just practice your social distancing. To breathe in the air from the outside. But particularly one other thing I'll mention is if you can get your feet off, like your shoes off, and you can get your feet into some grass, it actually does something physiological to us. It relaxes us. So just even walking around your yard in some grass, if that's possible for you. Tending plants, we started a little garden for my family while I've been here. So we've got tomatoes, we've got cucumbers, peppers. It's just a little pot garden. Not growing pot, but little pots.
I got to clarify, yes.
No, it's just well, I don't know what my parents are growing out there. It's not that, but just tomatoes and, just having something to take care of and to
Yeah.
be connected to and to watch the growth of.
Mm.
Anything that you can do to bring yourself into the present moment, connect yourself into your body so that your brain isn't the one running the show, particularly critter brain, will help you to become more connected and resourceful.
Wow. Well, Scott, I am really present right now to my gratitude. I really feel grounded, first of all, in this conversation. You and I have not had a personal one-on-one beyond today. I've seen you in front of others, and I am so grateful for how approachable and open you are and the generosity in which you want to share your knowledge and your experience and your wisdom and your guidance with all of us. So thank you so much for taking this time, extended time when your family's having dinner, where you can actually be a contribution to me and to anyone that's been watching and listening to this.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. And I so appreciate you creating a forum for people to learn more and connect more. And really, like, the questions you've asked and the way that you've framed them has been just such a sweet, gentle way that we can approach life. I see underneath all of your questions this desire to serve, to support, and to make the world better for people. And I just so appreciate you.
Thank you. It's reciprocal. Good. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Time to Come Alive. Please go to www.timetocomealive.com and subscribe so you get this interview and many others right in your inbox. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel and get notifications. If you don't want the inbox message, you can get notifications of this interview. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Scott, once again, and have a wonderful rest of the day, everybody.